Fresh Britain's deportation crisis, when criminal justice meets immigration chaos. Before we dive into what might be one of the most contentious political stories of the year, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. This channel cuts through the noise of British politics, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about our justice system. Picture this. A foreign national commits a serious crime on British soil, serves their sentence in a British prison funded by British taxpayers, and then when it comes time to leave the country, they simply refuse. And here's the kicker. Nearly half of them are getting away with it. Yes, you heard that correctly. 4 to 9%. Almost half. Let that number sink in for a moment because it represents a fundamental breakdown in how this country handles criminal justice and immigration enforcement. The latest figures released following a parliamentary question have revealed something that should alarm every single person watching this video. Between July 2024 and July 2025, just 2,632 foreign criminals, that's 51%, were successfully removed directly from prison under the early removal scheme, which means 49% decided to fight their deportation orders, primarily on human rights grounds. And while they lodge these taxpayer-funded appeals, they cannot be detained indefinitely. They are released onto our streets. They are walking among us, living in our communities, after committing crimes serious enough to warrant prison sentences and deportation orders. Now, before anyone accuses me of lacking compassion, let's be absolutely clear about what we're discussing here. These are not people seeking asylum. These are not refugees fleeing persecution. These are convicted criminals who have broken British laws, been sentenced by British courts, and deemed dangerous enough by the Home Office to warrant removal from the country. The question isn't whether they deserve human rights. Everyone does. The question is whether the system designed to protect public safety is working, and the evidence suggests it categorically is not. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick didn't mince his words when responding to these figures. He called it a complete scandal that the government is failing to remove nearly half of foreign criminals under the early release scheme before they are released onto the streets. And has got a point that's rather difficult to argue against. Given what we know about reoffending rates among those released early, and the statistics on this are genuinely disturbing, this represents a clear and present danger to public safety. Not theoretical danger. Not hypothetical risk. Real, tangible danger to real British citizens going about their daily lives. Reform UK MP Lee Anderson took an even harder line, calling it a national embarrassment and yet another example of soft-touch Britain. Under Reform government, he claims any foreign criminals would be immediately deported after their prison sentence ends. No IFS, no buts. Now, whether you agree with reformed politics or not, the sentiment resonates with a growing frustration among the British public who feel the system has lost its way, that somehow the rights of foreign criminals have superseded the rights of law-abiding citizens to feel safe in their own country. But here's where it gets interesting, and why this story isn't quite as black and white as the headlines might suggest. The Home Office has pointed out that the number who volunteered to be removed early is actually up 10% on the previous 12 months, when 2,385 left voluntarily. Since Labour came to power in July 2024, 5,179 foreign offenders have been returned, an increase of 14% compared to the 4,532 returns in the same period 12 months prior. So on the surface, things are improving. The numbers are moving in the right direction. Progress is being made. Except here's a problem with focusing on percentage increases. They can obscure the absolute numbers. Yes, removals are up 14%. Fantastic. But that still means thousands upon thousands of foreign criminals remain in the country, either fighting deportation orders or having successfully resisted them. And while the government spokesperson insists they are committed to deporting foreign national offenders and aim to remove them at the earliest opportunity, the reality on the ground tells a different story. A story of a system so bogged down by legal challenges, human rights appeals, and bureaucratic inertia that it's failing in its most basic function, protecting British citizens. The early removal scheme itself was meant to be a solution, a way to expedite the removal of foreign criminals before they complete their full sentences, saving taxpayer money and reducing a risk of reoffending. The idea was simple and logical. If you're going to be deported anyway, why keep you in a British prison at British expense when you could serve less time and be removed immediately? It's meant to be an incentive. Take the deal, Leave early, or stay and serve your full sentence before deportation. Except the scheme assumes deportation is inevitable, and as these figures demonstrate, what happens in practice is this. A foreign criminal finishes their sentence, or is offered early removal. They refuse, citing Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to family life. They claim they've established a life in Britain. Perhaps they have children here, a partner, family ties. Their legal team, often funded by legal aid, which means funded by you the taxpayer, argues that deportation would be a disproportionate interference with their human rights. The case goes to tribunal, then to appeal, then to further appeal. This process can take months, even years, and during this time, because they cannot be detained indefinitely without trial, they are released into the community. Supervised, supposedly, tagged, perhaps, but free nonetheless. And here's a truly maddening part. While they are fighting deportation, they are accumulating more rights. The longer they remain in the UK, the stronger their case becomes for being allowed to stay. It's a perverse incentive structure where gaming the system is rewarded and compliance is punished. The criminal who accepts their deportation is gone within weeks. The one who fights it gets to stay, at least temporarily, and possibly permanently. What kind of message does that send? Now, the government will argue, and they have a point, that they are bound by international law, that human rights conventions exist for good reasons, that we cannot simply deport people to countries where they might face persecution or torture. And yes, there are legitimate cases where deportation would genuinely violate someone's human rights. But when we're talking about almost half of all cases, when nearly every foreign criminal can find grounds to resist deportation, something has gone fundamentally wrong with how these laws are being interpreted and applied. The British public, I think it's fair to say, has reached the end of its patience with a system that appears to prioritize the rights of foreign criminals over the safety of law-abiding citizens. This isn't about xenophobia or racism or any of the usual accusations thrown around when immigration enforcement is discussed. This is about basic common sense. If you come to Britain, commit serious crimes, and are sentenced to prison, you've broken the social contract. You've demonstrated you cannot live peacefully in British society. Deportation isn't cruel or unusual. It's a logical consequence of criminal behavior by someone who has no inherent right to remain in the country. What makes this situation even more frustrating is the inconsistency. Britain can move heaven and earth to prevent certain people from entering the country, can deploy enormous resources to stop small boats crossing the channel, can implement hostile environment policies that make life difficult for people who've lived here for decades. But when it comes to removing convicted criminals, suddenly the system becomes paralyzed by legal complexity and human rights concerns. The priorities seem utterly backwards. And let's talk about the cost, because this isn't just a matter of public safety, it's a matter of public finance. Every foreign criminal kept in a British prison costs approximately £4,000 to £7,000 per year. Every legal appeal costs thousands more. Every day someone spends fighting deportation while living in the community, potentially on benefits, potentially in government-provided housing, costs money. Money that could be spent on schools, hospitals, police, infrastructure. Instead, it's spent on people who've committed crimes serious enough to warrant both prison and deportation. The opportunity cost is staggering. The political implications of this are enormous. Labour is desperate to appear tough on crime and immigration, two areas where they've historically struggled with public trust. The Conservatives, now in opposition, are equally desperate to exploit any perceived weakness on these issues. Reform UK is hovering in the wings, offering simple solutions to complex problems, gaining support every time stories like this emerge. And in the middle of it all are the British people, increasingly cynical about a political class that seems unable or unwilling to address their concerns about safety and fairness. What's needed is a fundamental rethink of how we handle foreign criminals. Perhaps deportation orders should be issued before sentencing, making removal automatic upon release. Perhaps we need to renegotiate our international obligations to allow for swifter deportations. Perhaps we need to invest in deportation infrastructure, more detention facilities, more immigration officers, faster court processes. Perhaps we need to make it clear that human rights protections, while important, cannot be used as a blanket shield against consequences for criminal behavior. These are difficult conversations, politically fraught and legally complex, but they are conversations we can no longer afford to avoid. The fundamental question is this: what kind of country do we want Britain to be? One where committing serious crimes as a foreign national results in swift removal, or one where legal technicalities and endless appeals allow convicted criminals to remain indefinitely? One where public safety is a paramount concern, or one where process and procedure trump practical outcomes? The answer should be obvious, but apparently it isn't. So where does this leave us? With a system that's failing, a public that's frustrated, and politicians offering more rhetoric than solutions. The numbers don't lie. 49% of foreign criminals are successfully resisting deportation, at least temporarily. That's not good enough. It's not acceptable, and it cannot continue. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about what's happening in British politics. Subscribe to UK Connors because we'll continue bringing you the stories that matter, the analysis you won't find elsewhere, and the uncomfortable truths that need to be said. The political establishment won't fix these problems unless they are held accountable, and holding them accountable is exactly what we do here. More stories like this are coming. You'll want to be here for them.